Do not eat the red flakes, Chef Threx announced, extending one long, jointed finger toward the steaming bowl in the center of the table. They will rupture your inner lining and dissolve your blood. Harlan Boone paused mid-scoop, half a spoonful of noodles hanging in the air. You mean the chili flakes, chili? Threx tilted his head, his 4 orange eyes blinking one after the other. What is? Chili? Gina Morrow leaned on the edge of the table, adjusting her translator earpiece. Capsaicin-based seasoning, dried peppers, pretty standard back home. Threx recoiled. That is what you call it, a seasoning. It is a chemical deterrent. I use it to keep the storage vermin from chewing through coolant lines. Harlan looked between them. Yeah, well, it's kind of a big deal on Earth. Spicy food's a whole thing. We build restaurants around it. You consume it. Threx's mandibles twitched. On purpose, Gina nodded. We even have contests. People eat the hottest stuff they can find just to see who lasts the longest before throwing up. Threx clicked his fingers together in what Harlan had learned was a Drazari sign of horror. That is not bravery. That is madness. Harlan shrugged. We're adaptable, or ill-informed, Threx muttered. That compound is not merely hot. For your biology, it is corrosive. It causes internal microtears, arterial spasms, and in some cases death. Harlan set his spoon down. Okay, but we've been using it for centuries. Maybe it just affects your species different. I have studied your anatomy, Threx replied. It damages you too. You have just normalized the pain, Gina frowned. We don't exactly just ignore it. We sweat, cry, sometimes it hurts, but it's manageable. Then you are ignoring it, Threx said. And you are all fools, Harlan chuckled. You'd think that, yeah, but a little heat never killed anyone. I assure you, Threx said, it has. They sat in silence for a moment. The translator buzzed faintly in the background. Gina broke it. What about the other ingredients in this dish? Is it safe? Threx shook his head. Most of it has been adjusted for human consumption. I removed the core venom sacs and filtered the broth. But the red flakes, I included them only as garnish. For appearance, I did not expect you to eat them. Why not just leave them out? Harlan asked. Because Drazari cuisine is judged by color balance, Threx said. Without red, it is considered lifeless. Dead food is dishonorable. Got it, Harlan said. So it looks nice, but we shouldn't actually eat it. No, Threx said. Unless you wish to spend the next week voiding blood and screaming. Harlan and Gina exchanged a look. Then Harlan asked, how bad is it if someone ate a small amount? Very bad, Threx said. Do not test this. 2 hours later, Harlan was in the infirmary. Doctor Caitlin Reeves looked down at the scan. Stomach lining damage, esophageal abrasions, blood pressure spiked to 190 over 120, and you're bleeding internally. What did you eat? Harlan moaned from the cot. Just a few flakes. Wanted to try. You what? Caitlin turned to Gina, who stood nearby. He thought it couldn't be that bad, Gina said. We didn't think one bite would. I told him not to eat it, Threx wailed from the hallway. Humans are reckless. He's lucky he didn't rupture anything major, Caitlin said. We need to stabilize his blood pressure. Start Roman 4 fluids, no food for the next 48 hours. I'm starting him on omeprazole and pain management. Is he going to be okay? Gina asked. If we keep the damage from spreading, yes, Caitlin said. But he's not walking out of here for at least 3 days. Harlan groaned again. I didn't know it had hit that fast. It's a toxin, Caitlin said. It's not like regular spice. You're not getting off with heartburn. Threx entered the room, his arms folded. I warned you. Harlan looked up weakly. Yeah, I know. Threx lowered his voice. Why would your kind eat fire to feel alive? Harlan mumbled. Threx tilted his head again. Then you must be very dead inside. Caitlin tapped the monitor. No more alien food without running it through bioanalysis first. I want a full dietary approval chart by tomorrow for any Drazari ingredients. Gina nodded. I'll talk to the embassy. Threx looked down at Harlan. You are recovering? Barely, Harlan whispered. Then perhaps next time you will believe me. Harlan didn't answer. The morphine drip silenced everything else. 4 hours had passed since Harlan had been wheeled into the infirmary, and the sterile air still carried the faint odor of singed gauze and antiseptic. The overhead light flickered once, as if it too disapproved of recent events. Harlan lay with an oxygen line under his nose, his eyes half-lidded and unfocused. Every so often he'd twitch, not from pain exactly, but from the memory of it rolling through his gut like molten gravel. A soft beeping from the monitor above him marked steady vitals, but his skin still glistened with residual sweat. At the foot of his bed, Gina leaned against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. She hadn't left. She hadn't said much either. "You're going to stare a hole through me if you keep that up," Harlan muttered. "I'm trying to figure out if I'm more furious or impressed," she said. "I vote impressed." "Let's go with that," he replied, his voice a rasp. "You couldn't have taken a sample, asked the lab to run tests." Literally anything other than swallowing something an alien compared to pest deterrent. "I thought it might be like wasabi," he said. "Intense, but not fatal. You thought wrong," she shot back. "And now you've got 3 layers of internal tissue trying to regenerate while your digestive system is on lockdown." "I noticed." Gina dragged a stool over and dropped onto it. "You're lucky Caitlin was on shift. If she hadn't caught the clotting cascade early, you'd be in a med pod." "Did you tell her I said thanks?" Harlan asked, trying to shift but wincing immediately. "She said she'll pass along a get-well fruit paste once you're allowed to ingest anything thicker than a mist." Tempting. There was a knock on the doorframe. Threx stood there, hands clasped behind his back in what, for his species, was a gesture of humility. "I was told I may enter," Gina nodded. "He's mostly conscious." Threx approached slowly, his long limbs moving with unusual restraint. "I have spoken with the culinary board. They requested a full incident report." "That sounds familiar," Harlan wheezed. "They were displeased," Threx added. "I am required to recertify before further food preparation is permitted on shared vessels." "You're getting penalized?" Gina asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Threx said. "Despite the warnings I provided, the outcome reflects poorly on interspecies culinary diplomacy. They consider this a breach of the Cooperative Edibility Accord." Harlan blinked. "There's a treaty about food." "There are over 200, Threx said. "The section on garnish safety alone is 41 pages. "Sounds like I just broke intergalactic law," Harlan muttered. "Not law," Threx replied. "Etiquette, but etiquette violations cascade." Gina leaned forward. "You said the flakes were visual embellishment. What exactly are they made of?" "Shredded scalvin pod husk," Threx said. "Dried under ultraviolet resonance and dusted with trace amounts of grit gland secretion from the Drazari beetle. They are considered beautiful but untouchable." "So, why do they look exactly like crushed red pepper?" Harlan asked. "That is unfortunate coincidence," Threx said. "Your species' culinary aesthetics overlap with ours in shape and vibrancy, but not in purpose." "Do Drazari ever eat them?" Gina asked. Threx recoiled slightly. "Only once. It was a political gesture. The ambassador did not survive." Harlan closed his eyes. "Well, that's comforting." "I do not understand your kind," Threx said, his gaze steady. "The moment you were warned, the moment you were told it was dangerous, your instinct was not to avoid it but to assess it firsthand." "I didn't mean to be reckless," Harlan said. "I just thought it might be exaggerated. Some things hit different across species. I didn't think it would be that extreme." "You did not think the word rupture was sufficient warning?" "I've had food that made my lips go numb. I figured I'd get a little burn." "Maybe a good story. You nearly destroyed your internal linings." "Yeah," Harlan sighed. "That part wasn't in the plan." Threx's fingers twitched together briefly. "I have requested access to human culinary archives. I aim to understand what leads a species to embrace pain as a flavor." Gina narrowed her eyes. "You're not planning to replicate anything, are you?" "Only for research," Threx said. "No ingestion." "I have already obtained clearance to examine the properties of something called ghost pepper extract." Harlan groaned. "That's like starting with a nuclear explosion to learn about fire." Then you admit your species approaches seasoning as a weapon. Not a weapon, Gina said. More like a challenge, Threx turned to her. To what end? Bragging rights, endorphins. Some people just enjoy the rush, she said. Pain as entertainment, Threx murmured. We were told humans were robust. But we did not understand you would agitate your own biology for amusement. Yeah, Harlan muttered. We're kind of weird like that. A silence settled. Then Threx asked, Do you wish to continue eating Drazari food once you recover? Harlan hesitated. Maybe. If I can read the ingredient list first. I will develop a visual guide, Threx said, color-coded with hazard icons. Appreciated. I must return to the kitchens. My recertification involves designing a dish that cannot harm any known species, even by accident. That sounds impossible, said Gina. It is, Threx admitted, but so is surviving scalven husk ingestion. And yet here we are. As Threx exited, Gina reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data slate. There's a memo circulating, she said. Command wants protocols updated on all multicultural food sharing events. You've officially become the reason for a policy revision. Glad to be of service, Harlan muttered, eyes closing again. They should name it after me, the Boone Clause, Gina snorted. You're lucky they don't name a cautionary tale instead. Already did, Harlan mumbled as sleep overtook him. It's called lunch. 3 days later, Harlan's legs still felt like wet rope, but at least he could stand without the room tilting sideways. The infirmary's humidity had been raised for another patient's respiratory needs, so his hair clung to his forehead in damp coils. A nurse handed him a nutrient gel pouch and gestured toward the discharge tablet. He nodded, signed with an unsteady thumbprint, and shuffled out with the slow dignity of someone who'd recently been defeated by something that looked like a pizza topping. Gina waited outside, arms loaded with paperwork, a datapad balanced on top. You look like a man who just survived a tactical error, she said. I feel like I lost a bet with an oven. You're cleared for light duty. No exertion, no stress, and no unsupervised consumption of anything more flavorful than beige. I'll try to control my wild urges, Harlan said, taking the datapad from her. Is this the new protocol, Draft 3? Legal got involved. Turns out, once a species classifies an ingredient as a decorative hazard, it triggers cautionary clauses in the interspecies cooperation guidelines. Did not know that was a thing. It wasn't until last week. You helped invent it. He frowned at the screen, scrolling past the hazard icons and dietary disclaimers. This many warning labels seems like overkill. Well, Gina said, it's either that or a full ban on shared meals. And no one wants last week's incident becoming the default example in every cultural exchange workshop. As they turned down the corridor toward the common deck, the ambient lighting adjusted itself to simulate late afternoon. The station's artificial day cycle had a calming effect, even if the sun didn't technically exist outside the walls. Threx wants to see you, Gina said. He's in the prep lab. Is he still mad? No, but he's not thrilled either. Fair. They found Threx in a sterilized chamber that resembled a high-tech greenhouse crossed with a chemistry lab. Tubes of various viscosities ran between hanging nutrient sacks and heating coils, while a central table displayed an array of ingredients under labeled containment domes. Threx didn't look up from his work. You are ambulatory. Barely, Harlan said. But upright. Acceptable progress. Threx tapped a control surface, dimming the light over a tray of glistening orange filaments. I have been revising my catalog. Of what substances your species finds edible despite terminal warnings. That's a long list. I have noticed. Threx finally looked up. I have a question. Go ahead. Why do humans repeatedly expose themselves to compounds that trigger your pain receptors? Harlan scratched his temple. It's not really about the pain, it's the build-up, the challenge. The release. You equate biological distress with entertainment? Sometimes, depends on context. Your species lacks a consistent survival instinct. I'd argue it's more like selective stubbornness. Threx tilted his head. You are aware that capsaicinoids evolved to repel mammalian predators. Sure, but we like a bit of pushback from our food, makes it feel earned. Consumption should not require conquest. Tell that to every barbecue pitmaster on Earth. Threx leaned closer to the containment dome. I have isolated a compound that mimics the scalvin husk's visual appearance but lacks its corrosive properties. Trying to make a safe version? Yes, so humans may eat without injury and Drazari may serve without cautionary placards. That's considerate of you. It is practical. I do not wish to be reassigned to sanitation. Harlan's eyebrows lifted. They threatened that? No, but they removed my access to the main spice vault. I now require dual sign-off to retrieve anything with a hazard rating. Sounds like you're grounded. I am a chef, Threx said. Not a child. Gina stepped forward, peering into the dome. What's this substitute made from? Dehydrated haxel root shavings. Neutral to humans, mildly sweet to Drazari, visually identical to the original garnish under red spectrum lighting. Does it taste the same? No. But it will not hospitalize anyone. That's already an improvement, Harlan said. Threx tapped another control. A panel slid open, revealing a small dish with a careful arrangement of pale yellow noodles, garnished with the new flakes. This version has passed molecular safety scans. I offer it as a peace gesture. Harlan's hand hesitated over the tray. Are you sure? I will perform the scan again if needed. No, I trust you, mostly. He took a cautious bite. The noodles were soft, the broth mild, but the flakes added a gentle pop of something almost citrusy. Not bad, he said. Different from what I expected, but not in a bad way. Threx observed him carefully. No burning, none. My insides feel unthreatened. Gina took a sample too. It's actually good, like a toned-down ginger snap. Threx nodded. Acceptable. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of filtration systems and distant footfalls filling the space. So, Harlan said, what happens now? I submit my revised recipe to the cooperative database, Threx said. And you are listed as a cautionary footnote. I made history. You made an error, Threx corrected. History merely recorded it. Gina grinned. You're a culinary cautionary tale now. How does that feel? Harlan exhaled. Honestly, fair. Threx began sealing away his equipment. There is one thing I still do not understand. What's that? Why, despite warnings, injuries, and sensory distress, your kind continues to pursue these experiences. Harlan looked down at the nearly empty dish. Because it reminds us we're alive, I think. That there's something to conquer, even if it's just a plate of food. Threx shook his head. You are a species of contradiction. Yeah, Harlan said. We get that a lot. The door behind them slid open with a hiss. A junior engineer stepped in, holding a data pad. There's a problem with the water filtration unit in Sector 12. Chef Threx, they're asking if the kitchen can switch to reserve storage until the system's flushed. Threx waved him off. Tell them I will authorize it. And remind them not to store root starch near the coolant lines again. The engineer nodded and left. Gina turned back to Threx. Do you think your people will approve the new garnish? I do not know, he said. But it no longer poses a threat, that may be enough. And for us? Harlan asked. You are free to eat it. Without bleeding? Threx blinked all four eyes slowly. That is the idea. They stood together, the three of them, in a room where mistaken dinner choices had nearly started a diplomatic incident. Now, with a safer substitute and a better understanding, it felt almost like progress. Almost. 6 days after the incident, Harlan found himself standing grudgingly on the observation deck outside the culinary integration chamber. His posture was stiff, more from being forced into light duty than lingering pain, and his arms were crossed with the kind of tension that comes from being under review. Beside him, Gina tapped through a list of flagged ingredients on her command-issued wrist module, cross-referencing with the updated shared edibility chart. Inside the chamber, Threx moved with the same meticulous discipline he applied to every aspect of his food preparation. His tools were arranged by molecular volatility, not size or function, and the air shimmered slightly from the temperature-controlled isolation field that had been installed after what the crew now referred to as the garnish event. "I still say it wasn't a garnish," Harlan muttered, eyes fixed on the rows of labeled vials along the back wall. "It had a warning label in 5 languages, 2 of which had to be added after you ate it," Gina replied, not looking up. "Commands calling it a retroactive hazard tag. I'm a trendsetter. You're a liability with a stomach." Threx glanced up through the reinforced glass and waved them in without pausing his work. They entered through the decontamination seal, which hissed as it scanned their biometrics for any open dermal abrasions. The system had been newly calibrated to flag even minor cuts, ever since it was discovered that trace particles from certain Drazari compounds could induce hallucinations if absorbed through broken skin. "Your vitals are stable again," Threx asked Harlan without preamble. "Normal range. Mostly. No more internal bleeding. Your threshold for what qualifies as normal continues to disturb me. I'm trying to keep it simple." Threx turned slightly, gesturing toward a low table holding 3 sample dishes. Each had been meticulously plated, 1 square, 1 conical, 1 with a spiral of translucent fibers that caught the overhead light like spun glass. These represent the baseline of Drazari flavor profiles custom adjusted for human tolerance. No reactive compounds, no enzymatic volatility, no biological triggers. Gina raised an eyebrow. "You mean they're bland?" "No," Threx replied. "They are within a safe margin of error. That is not the same thing." Harlan leaned forward. "I can try them?" "Yes, slowly, 1 at a time. No swallowing until you've confirmed no adverse effects." "Is this about trust or liability?" "Yes." He picked up a small utensil made of resin grown to neutralize taste distortion and scooped a portion of the spiral-shaped dish. The texture was cool but not slimy, with a consistency that reminded him vaguely of fiddlehead ferns. It tasted faintly of mineral water and something else, not sweet, not savory, but sharply clean, sterile almost. "No reaction," he said after a long pause. "Good," Threx said. "You can proceed to the next." As Harlan began testing the second sample, Gina turned to Threx. "Why the sudden interest in making your dishes edible for humans? You weren't trying this hard before." Threx tapped a sequence on his prep console, activating a small display. "Because the incident demonstrated a failure in mutual comprehension. I believed certain warnings were sufficient. They were not. I am adapting." "Some would have just stopped serving humans altogether," Gina said. "Some might. But I would prefer to understand why your species insists on interpreting danger as an invitation. We don't do that all the time. Only often enough to require color-coded ingestion charts." Harlan coughed. "This second one's got a weird aftertaste, like metal." Threx tilted his head. "That's expected. The base is derived from root silicates suspended in stabilized gel. It mimics the sensation of heat without triggering nociceptors. It tastes like licking a battery. That is not in the description you provided of your Earth cuisine." Gina shook her head. "You're not going to find a one-to-one translation. Humans have regional palates. What's a delicacy in one country gets you arrested in another. I have heard this. In one region, you consume fermented fish sealed in pressurized containers." "Yeah. That's a whole thing. I do not understand it." "Neither do we," Harlan muttered. Threx powered down the display and reached for a sealed vial, holding it up with a kind of reverence. "This is my last test for today. It contains a synthesized version of what you call spice, no actual irritants." "Only the illusion." "You're trying to fake heat?" Harlan asked. "Yes, a simulation using thermally suggestive compounds that activate only taste perception, not physical response." "That's ambitious." "It is necessary. Your species appears to derive satisfaction from adversity." "I am attempting to replicate the experience without harm." Harlan took the final sample. It was a single droplet suspended in a gel sphere, resting in a concave spoon. He placed it on his tongue and waited. At first, there was nothing. Then a slow, creeping warmth, not painful but insistent. It rose toward his sinuses, settled behind his eyes, and then dissipated. "That's not bad," he said. "Kind of like the first 5 seconds of a really good curry before the fire kicks in." Threx observed him closely. "No discomfort, just enough to notice. Not enough to regret." "Then I have succeeded." Gina leaned closer. "You realize what you're doing, right? I am ensuring no further incidents occur. You're reverse engineering our bad habits. I am engineering compatibility." Harlan lowered the spoon. "You think humans are going to appreciate nuance after generations of trying to outburn each other? They will appreciate not being hospitalized. That might not be enough to stop them." "I am not trying to stop them. I am offering a safer path." A chime sounded from the wall panel. A message flashed briefly. "Command request test report submission required within 2 hours. Threx dismissed it with a wave. "They are impatient. They're expecting a food-safe update for the entire galley," Gina said. "You're part of the rotation now, I am aware." "I will comply." Harlan stepped back from the table. "So what happens next? More trials?" "No," Threx said. "Next, we test under social conditions, shared consumption, group evaluation. You're planning a dinner?" "Yes, with both species present, controlled portions, moderated reactions. No unapproved additions." "That sounds like a recipe for disaster." "It is a recipe for understanding." Gina crossed her arms. "You really think you can bridge culture with modified spice analogs?" Threx looked between them. "I believe I can create a meal that does not end in medical intervention. For now, that is a sufficient goal." Harlan exhaled slowly. "Well, if the food doesn't kill us, maybe we'll finally stop treating it like a dare." "Perhaps," Threx said. "But I will prepare the antidote station regardless." They left the chamber in silence, the hum of the isolation field fading behind them. Down the corridor, a crew member passed carrying a tray of sealed emergency rations, neutral gray cubes, flavorless and safe. Harlan glanced at them, then back at Gina. "I miss being bored at lunch. Then maybe don't pick fights with garnish next time." No promises. 72 hours after Threx received approval from the Interspecies Dietary Board for his modified recipes, the galley's main dining hall was transformed into something that resembled a cautious ceasefire zone rather than a celebration of culinary diplomacy. Tables had been rearranged into concentric arcs, half the seating labeled in human standard script, the other half in Drazari glyphs that pulsed gently with color to indicate safe seating alignment. A soft amber glow bathed the room, neutral on both species' photoreceptors, with ventilation tuned to prevent cross-scent contamination. Harlan stood just outside the entrance, running a hand through his now fully dried hair. He watched a pair of Drazari technicians adjust the serving drones, ensuring the containment domes stayed sealed until final placement. Every movement was deliberate, every precaution double-checked. Even the utensils had been redesigned, one end flat and square for Drazari, the other curved for human grip patterns. "I feel like I'm about to be part of a medical trial," Harlan muttered. "You kind of are," Gina said, stepping up beside him. "Only this time it's voluntary and no one's bleeding." "Yet, think anyone brought snacks just in case?" Command issued a secondary meal pack for every participant. Flavor neutral, texture stable, and sealed in triple foil. So yes, they planned for failure. I was hoping for optimism. Optimism doesn't write incident reports. Threx appeared from the side entrance, wearing a thermal apron layered in hexagonal plating. His antennae were threaded through 2 interlocking loops that signified formal presentation, an archaic culinary tradition among the Drazari, according to the briefing documents, meant only for situations where food itself was a diplomatic envoy. "You have arrived early," Threx said, eyeing both of them. "Wanted to get a feel for the room," Gina replied. "And make sure the fire suppression systems aren't on standby." They are, Threx said, but only as a precaution. I do not anticipate combustion. Comforting, Harlan said flatly. The first dish will be distributed in 21 minutes. You will be seated at table 4, human side. Anything I should know ahead of time? Yes, do not attempt to identify the ingredients aloud. It may cause confusion and in one case offense. Why offense? Threx hesitated. One component translates loosely to resilient larval milkstone. When pronounced in a certain human accent, it resembles a Drazari term for anatomical disgrace. Got it. Don't describe anything, just eat. Correct. They took their seats as the room slowly filled. Humans filtered in with cautious expressions, some in uniform, others in civilian attire. A few carried handheld scanners, discreetly tracking molecular profiles of airborne particles. On the opposite side, Drazari guests moved in coordinated groups, their robes layered in soft thermal reactive fabric that displayed shifting colors as they walked. A bell chimed, not an actual bell, but an audio cue modeled after both species' alert systems. It triggered the drones to begin distribution. The first course arrived in a half-sphere bowl, the contents gently steaming under a transparent dome. The human side received a slightly different variant identical in appearance, but with a small blue triangle projected above it indicating safe consumption range. Harlan stared at the dish. The surface was smooth, semi-translucent, with faint marbling that resembled polished agate. It emitted a subtle aroma unfamiliar, but clean, like rain on metal. Threx approached their table, flanked by a Drazari aide carrying a translator node. This course is called Varnal Essence, he announced. It is intended to simulate the anticipatory phase of heat without triggering physical response. The flavor profile is derived from pressure-tempered root sap and filtered through thermal resonance. Jenner raised a brow. So it's spice without the burn. It is sensation without harm, Threx corrected. Harlan picked up his utensil. Why does it look like a jellyfish sculpture? Because it is meant to evoke the illusion of complexity. Your species associates visually intricate food with elevated value. This is a cultural compromise. He took a bite. The texture collapsed instantly into a cool vapor that surged across his tongue, then lingered just behind his nasal passage with a warming sensation that never quite became pain. His eyes widened. That's weird. Pleasant? Threx asked. Not unpleasant, just it's like the taste is chasing itself around my head. That is intentional. Jenner tried hers next. She tensed slightly, then blinked. It's like someone loaded a heat simulator into my sinuses but forgot to include the agony. Threx nodded once. Precisely. You are experiencing the illusion of spice. Across the room, a Drazari delegate signaled approval with a slow rotation of their wrist, a gesture translated on the screen above as curious satisfaction. Other Drazari followed suit, their gestures varying but generally positive. The second course arrived without announcement. This time it was a series of small cubes, each a different hue ranging from pale ochre to deep amethyst. Harlan hesitated. No dome this time. Threx appeared again, this time behind them. These require exposure to atmosphere for full effect. The hues indicate element combinations designed to replicate the psychological build-up of intensity. Harlan picked up one of the darker cubes and sniffed it. The scent hit him like a memory he'd forgotten, sharp, earthy, with a dry undertone of something like scorched clove. He took a bite. The cube disintegrated into powder, then fizzed slightly, leaving behind a mild tingling that spread across his cheeks. I don't know what that is, but my face feels like it's blushing. That is a vascular enhancer derived from safe proteins. It mimics the blood vessel dilation associated with capsaicin exposure. So it's fake spice that makes me feel like I'm reacting to real spice? Yes, but without danger. Honestly, that's impressive. Jenner was less convinced. It's clever, but it's still missing something. What is missing? Threx asked. The risk, she said. Spice for us isn't just about heat, it's about knowing you're towing a line, pulling back just before it hurts too much. Threx tilted his head. You require peril to feel satisfaction, not require, but it's part of the thrill. That is unfortunate, maybe, she said, but it's human. As the third course arrived, Threx remained silent. The dish was a single strip of something that resembled charred bark laid across a ceramic plank. A faint shimmer hovered just above its surface like heat rising from asphalt. Harlan touched it with the edge of his utensil. The strip twitched. It's reactive, he asked. Yes, Threx said, to warmth, not touch. He took a cautious bite. The flavor was bitter at first, then gave way to a deep, resonant smokiness that reminded him of something primal: campfires, burnt edges, the kind of taste that lingered in the back of your memory longer than on your tongue when he swallowed. He felt a slow, crawling warmth along his collarbone. Not painful, not even uncomfortable, just present, that's really close. Threx's eyes narrowed. Close to what? To the thing we chase when we eat something too spicy, that moment when it stops being about taste. Then I have succeeded, almost, Harlan said, setting down his utensil. You're replicating the sensation, but we still know it's safe, that's the difference. Threx folded his arms. You wish to feel danger with your meal? No. We just wish to believe it might happen. I do not understand your species. That's fair. As the guests finished, the room dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the meal. No alarms sounded. No one doubled over gasping. The drones began silently collecting the dishes. Threx turned to them both. Will this be enough to satisfy your kind? It's a start, Gina said, but you may never fully get us. I do not need to get you, Threx replied. I only need to keep you alive long enough to try dessert. Harlan chuckled once, then winced. Please tell me dessert doesn't mimic electrical shock. No, Threx said. It simulates the emotional release after surviving near death. Gina leaned forward. You based a dish on post-trauma relief. You said you wanted authenticity. They stared at him, unsure if he was serious. Threx didn't blink. Then Gina laughed, just once. A genuine, surprised bark of disbelief. Well, she said, this is going to be interesting. Exactly 2 days after the diplomatic meal simulation, Harlan Boone found himself sitting across from Threx in the auxiliary mess hall, a smaller, less ceremonial space tucked between the hydroponics bay and the recycling intake. The lighting here was functional, the tables mismatched, and the air carried an undertone of sterilized algae. A tray of Threx's latest creation rested between them, a single oblong loaf, striped with alternating layers of marbled green and beige, emitting a faint warmth but no discernible smell. This doesn't look like food, Harlan said, leaning forward. Looks like a geological sample someone baked into a casserole. It is a recalibrated variant of the Drazari sustenance loaf, Threx replied, designed for low-risk environments and neutral zones. Functionally edible to both species. Functionally edible, Harlan repeated. You sure know how to make a guy's mouth water. You requested something simple. I requested something that wouldn't confuse my tongue. That is unreasonable, Threx said, tapping his claws lightly on the edge of the tray. Your tongue is already confused by design. It interprets bitterness as a threat and then craves it. This loaf is intentionally unprovocative. Harlan picked up a slice and examined it. It's warm. That's something. It maintains a stable internal temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. That's body heat. Correct. Gina entered through the side hatch, holding a sealed pouch and wearing a look that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. She dropped into the seat beside Harlan and set the pouch down with a dull thud. Command's final report came in, she said. Your incidents officially categorized under cross-species edibility conflict. Subtype B, voluntary ingestion of incompatible substance following verbal warning. Is that better or worse than subtype A? A means you were tricked. B means you were warned and did it anyway. Threx nodded without looking up. That classification is accurate. I was hoping for something a little more heroic, Harlan muttered. You ingested a known biohazard to prove a culinary point, Threx said. There is no valor in that. I didn't say it was smart. No, Threx agreed. You did not. Gina opened the pouch and pulled out a folded cloth map. They're using your case in the new interspecies orientation packet. You're a sidebar next to the section called When Curiosity Overrides Caution. Great, immortalized as a footnote in bad decisions. Could have been worse, she said. They could have included photos. They did, Threx added, to illustrate symptoms. I submitted the sequence from the infirmary scans. Harlan dropped his head onto the table with a soft thud. Perfect. Your story now serves as a deterrent, Threx said. That is a form of usefulness. Yeah, I guess that's something. Gina unfolded the map and turned it toward Threx. New requisition zones for culinary supplies. They've restricted access to the cross-species pantry. You'll need a human liaison to retrieve anything with dual classification. I expected that, Threx said. I have already submitted the necessary forms. I am cleared for supervised access between 1400 and 1600 hours daily. You're adapting to bureaucracy, Harlan said, lifting his head. I am surviving it. That's the human way. No, Threx said, it is the Drazari way when exposed to prolonged human interaction. Gina leaned back in her chair. So what happens now? You've proven you can make something we can eat. We've proven we'll eat things we shouldn't. Is this where we all learn our lesson and stop making things weird? Threx tilted his head. You believe the lesson has been learned? I think the paperwork alone scared most people straight. I disagree, Threx replied. You will forget, eventually. That's optimistic. No. It is a prediction. Harlan took a bite of the loaf. It was warm, slightly fibrous, and tasted like nothing. Not bland exactly, more like the absence of flavor. It reminded him of chewing on a memory of food you couldn't quite place. This is the most aggressively neutral thing I've ever tasted, he said. It's like the concept of food without the commitment. That was the intent, Threx replied. Gina stared at her slice. I'm not sure if I'm offended or grateful. Both are appropriate reactions. Harlan chewed thoughtfully. You know, I don't hate it. It's just not trying to impress anyone. It is designed only to sustain, Threx said. Maybe that's what we needed from the start, Gina said. Something that doesn't try to prove anything. Threx folded his arms. You required catastrophe to appreciate simplicity. Yeah, Harlan said. That tracks. A maintenance drone passed overhead, humming softly as it adjusted the ceiling filters. The room's temperature dropped by 0.5 degrees, a subtle shift but noticeable. Is it over now? Harlan asked. The fallout, the reviews, the reports? Gina nodded. Officially, yes. Unofficially, people are still going to bring it up anytime someone questions the food. Threx stood. I have no intention of repeating the mistake. Good, Gina said, because if you do, I'm assigning you to the Taste Neutral Rations Task Force. That is unnecessary. I have tasted them. Harlan lifted his slice in mock salute. To learning experiences. Threx hesitated, then mirrored the gesture. To survivable meals. Gina raised hers last. To not ending up in the medbay because someone thought heat meant fun. They tapped their slices together with a soft thunk of compressed nutrients, and for a moment, the sound was enough. Later that evening, Harlan returned to his quarters. He sat on the edge of his bunk, looked at the leftover slice of sustenance loaf he'd wrapped in foil, and laughed quietly to himself. It wasn't the worst thing he'd eaten. It wasn't the best either. But it hadn't tried to kill him, and that, he decided, was progress. The ship's artificial night cycle dimmed the corridor lights outside. He set the loaf on his desk, lay back, and closed his eyes. No alarms, no burning, no regrets. That, for Harlan Boone, was a meal worth remembering.